That was one of those introductory scenes from The Simpsons, in this case a tongue-in-cheek look at Homer Simpson's evolution. Tonight we're paying tribute to Charles Darwin, his ideas, and the scientific revolution he inspired. We'll also be looking at why it is that people of faith have been clashing with scientists over Darwin's ideas in the 150 years that have passed since his Origin of Species was first published. I'm Manolo Quezon, the Explainer. This is the Explainer, where we explain why issues are issues. Now, joining us are our panel of reactors, or what we like to call our clever panel: provocative political blogger Dean George Bocobo, founder of the Rock Ed movement Gang Badoy, and professor of theology at the University of Santo Tomas, Father Efren Rivera. Now, we also have in our studio today students from the Dr. Josefa Jara Martinez High School, and welcome to all of you. Okay, let's begin with the common misconception that we evolved from apes. Now, what evolution really means, and as Charles Darwin and others argued, was that we most probably shared a common ancestor with apes, that somewhere along the line the branches forked. And on one hand, the various apes and monkeys evolved along their paths, while our species evolved along another. Now, it's been 200 years since Charles Darwin was born on February 12, 1809, and the bicentennial of his birth was marked with great festivity in the scientific world. Now, here at home, the sciences are less prominent, and so Darwin's bicentennial has been less noticeable as an event, except perhaps within our pretty small scientific community. Now, in 1831, it all began with a young man, Darwin, embarking on a voyage on the HMS Beagle. Lasting nearly 5 years, the trip most famously included his observations on the Galapagos Islands and his looking into the variations among similar species, such as tortoises and finches. Now, his travelogue of his trip became a bestseller. Now, meanwhile, his mind was digesting the observations he had made and the observations and thoughts of other scientists who were commenting on what he'd seen. Now, here, reproduced by the Curated Objects website, is a page from one of his notebooks from sometime in the middle of July 1837. Now, it shows a tree and graphically represents what would come to be his exploration of the, quote, transmutation of species, or what we more familiarly know as evolution. Now, above the tree, he had written, "I think." Now, seldom has a light bulb moment been so wonderfully preserved for posterity. Now, he arrived at his theory of natural selection way back in 1838, but it wasn't until 1858, or 20 years later, when he finally decided to publish his ideas, upon being approached by someone with a similar idea. Now, in 1859, On the Origin of Species came out. Now, the BBC documentary Darwin's Struggle, The Evolution of the Origin of Species, gives a wonderful account of the genesis and incubation of Darwin's ideas, which we don't have time to cover. But this does bring us to how, on one hand, Darwin's ideas have had a profound influence on biology and the other sciences, and on the other hand, have triggered hostility from religious quarters. Now, consider this man, a monk, Gregor Mendel, and his contributions to genetics. Now, I'm sure you remember drawing something like this, which we happen to have borrowed from Wikipedia. Now, this thing is called a Punnett square, and in this case, it shows that if you have two small Y chromosomes and you're a banana, you'll be green. But if you have a big Y and a small Y chromosome, you'll be a yellow banana. And what happens when you cross yellow with green bananas? About half of the bananas will be yellow. Now, in another Wikipedia image, you can see how this process can be used to predict the outcomes of more complicated crossbreedings involving different traits. But the essential point of Mendel's findings, and the combination of all the other findings of scientists like Darwin in all sorts of spheres of scientific inquiry, are, broadly speaking, the following. First, that the world is far older than the Bible represents it. Second, that the creatures that inhabit the earth evolved from other creatures, and that this process of natural selection ensured the survival of the creatures that were best suited to the circumstances at the time. Third, that humans are animals like any other, that they didn't just materialize as we know humankind is today, but evolved from other creatures. And of course, this then raises the question that if humans did evolve, how can they be said to be in the image of God or have been created in an instant? Now this, some Anglican churchmen said at the time, was pure and simple heresy. And so Darwin's wife, Emma Wedgwood, who by all accounts loved her husband dearly and nursed him through all the strange illnesses that plagued him after his Beagle voyages, was haunted by a particular fear. That particular fear was that as she observed churchmen react with hostility to her husband, and as she witnessed her husband abandoning his faith, describing himself eventually as an agnostic, that she and her husband would never be reunited in heaven after he and she died. Now, in her case, she stuck by her husband, loved him deeply as he loved her, and both were model parents regardless of their divergent beliefs. But that was the Darwin family. For others, the clash between faith and science has been ferocious and continues to be so, which we'll explore further when we return.
Can't you understand that if you take a law like evolution and you make it a crime to teach it in the public schools, tomorrow you can make it a crime to teach it in the private schools, and tomorrow you may make it a crime to read about it, and soon you may ban books and newspapers. And then you may turn Catholic against Protestant, and Protestant against Protestant, and try to foist your own religion upon the mind of man. If you can do one, you can do the other, because fanaticism and ignorance is forever busy and needs feeding. And soon, Your Honor, with banners flying and with drums beating, we'll be marching backward, through the glorious ages of that 16th century, when bigots burned the man who dared bring enlightenment and intelligence to the human mind.
That was a scene from Inherit the Wind, the play by Jerome Lawrence and Robert Edwin Lee. Now, the play was a fictionalized account of a real trial that took place in 1925. The state of Tennessee had outlawed the teaching of evolution. A science teacher, John T. Scopes, defied the law, teaching Darwinism to his high school science class. Charges were filed. Now, in the courtroom, Clarence Darrow, a noted attorney, clashed with this man, William Jennings Bryan, whom we've met before in other episodes, as the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party who opposed the conquest of the Philippines. Anyway, in that courtroom, Bryan prosecuted on behalf of the state's hostility to Darwinism, while Darrow defended science and the teacher. Now, here's another scene I'd like you to watch from the play and the film by the same name.
Darwin took us forward to a hilltop, from where we could look back and see the way from which we came. But for this insight and for this knowledge, we must abandon our faith in the pleasant poetry of Genesis.
We must not abandon faith. Faith is the most important thing.
Then why did God plague us with the power to think? Mr. Brady, why do you deny the one faculty of man that raises him above the other creatures of the earth? The power of his brain to reason. What other merit have we? The elephant is larger, the horse is swifter and stronger, the butterfly is far more beautiful, the mosquito is more prolific, even the simple sponge is more durable. What does a sponge think?
I don't know. I am a man, not a sponge.